welcome to another video. So today I am so excited to be in the great outdoors because it's beautiful today. And I just wanted to say happy Poetry Month. April is National Poetry Month, and I wanted to give you guys a few recommendations for some poetry that I think is great for anyone starting out with poetry. And I think now is a great time to get into some poetry if you've never touched it before. So let's get started. Alright, so first of all, I have this little collection by William Carlos Williams called The Red Wheelbarrow and Other Poems. And this one, it's one of those canonized poetry collections. William Carlos Williams is a very famous poet, so it can seem daunting to get into a poetry collection like that. But in reality, this is the most small, cute, approachable poetry collection that I could ever show you. So I'm just going to read to you the namesake of this poetry collection, The Red Wheelbarrow. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow, glazed with rainwater, beside the white chickens. And that's it. That's the poem. That poem has stuck with me for a very long time. It's one of my all-time favorite poems. I've memorized it. But I would definitely check out this poetry collection. I think it's a great way to get started on some of the poetry canon, to get your feet wet in that, but also it's so cute and approachable, and I think a lot of the poems in here are of the same kind of small, digestible poetry that I think would be really great for beginners. Alright, so moving on to an anthology. I think it's really interesting to start reading poetry through anthologies because it gives you a range of different authors, different perspectives. This particular anthology is There Are Girls Like Lions, Poems About Being a Woman, and they're poems from all different time periods, all different kinds of authors about being a woman. And I think that's just such an interesting concept, and it's a really, really wonderful poetry collection. So I'm going to be reading to you The Heart of a Woman by Georgia Douglas Johnson. And this is the artwork that goes along with it. It's just absolutely gorgeous. So without further ado, The Heart of a Woman. The heart of a woman goes forth with the dawn, as lone bird, soft winging so restlessly on. Afar o'er life's turrets and vales does it roam. In the wake of those echoes the heart calls home. The heart of a woman falls back with the night, and enters some alien cage in its plight, and tries to forget it has dreamed of the stars, while it breaks, breaks, breaks on the sheltering bars. So that is my recommendation for a poetry anthology, and this is just a wonderful collection in general if you're interested in books or poetry about being a woman, poetry about feminism. It's a great way to get started with that kind of poetry. Alright, moving on to some modern poetry. I will mention Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. This is the original kind of modern poetry collection that we think of when we think about modern poetry movement, Instagram poetry, all of that. And this is the one that I would recommend starting out with if you're getting into modern poetry. Because even though it's very polarizing and a lot of things can be cliche in a way, I think this particular collection is so thought-provoking and deals with trauma in a way that's accessible and understandable to any audience. And I think modern poetry is so important in that movement towards accessibility of literature. I think that's so incredibly important as a society for us to be helping young adults and people who don't have accessibility to literature to get some access to great poetry. So I'm going to read you a poem from the section Healing, and this one's untitled. I want to apologize to all the women I have called pretty, before I've called them intelligent or brave. I am sorry I made it sound as though something as simple as what you're born with is the most you have to be proud of, when your spirit has crushed mountains. From now on, I will say things like, you are resilient, or you are extraordinary, not because I don't think you're pretty, but because you are so much more than that. And I think that really embodies the spirit of empowerment that you get from this collection. So definitely if you're interested in modern poetry, getting into poetry, this is a great place to start. Alright, moving on to another modern poetry collection. This collection is one that I've read a lot of modern poetry at this point, and this is one of my all-time favorite collections because it feels like modern poetry in its accessibility and simplicity of language, but it also covers really important topics of words and art and how we use our art to make a difference in society. So I'm going to read you a poem from this one. Isn't it absolutely, terrifyingly, shockingly amazing how words, those tiny little sounds in this chemical-filled air, those shapeless, weird marks on stark white paper, can make or break living, breathing people, stab them at heart without a single weapon, push them off their strong, firm feet, take away the earth they used to stand on. Words, they're powerlessly powerful, so use yours well. So that is Yesterday I Was the Moon by Noor Unahar. Again, very accessible and easy to read, easy to understand the messages behind them, but it definitely talks a lot about art and what our art means to the world and society. So I would definitely recommend this poetry collection as well. And finally, one of my all-time favorite poetry collections, this is Felicity by Mary Oliver. I love Mary Oliver, and I think she's a good bridge between kind of the more classic or canonized poetry and the modern poetry, because she recently passed away, I believe last year, and she was writing all through the 60s and 70s and 80s, and into this one, it was published in 2015, and this was her last collection. So she kind of has that background of all of those older poems and is writing this book in a space that is full of those modern poetry ideals. So I'm going to read you one in here called Everything That Was Broken. Everything that was broken has forgotten its brokenness. I live now in a sky house, through every window the sun. Also your presence, our touching, our stories, earthly and holy both. How can this be? But it is. Every day has something in it whose name is forever. So I just really like the imagery, I really like the way that the poetry is formatted, and I think this is a great way of kind of going between those two distinctive time periods and genres. But anyway, those are my recommendations for some poetry to get into this poetry month, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and try to get outside if it's really nice where you live. It definitely helps lift the spirit and get you into a better mood. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!